She declared war on my 8-year-old over a $2 cup of lemonade. She threatened me with her husband's police badge, trashed my son's stand, slashed my tires, and even threw a lemon at my child. I didn't yell. I didn't fight back. I just pressed record and watched her destroy her own life. My name's Evan, 38, male, and I'm writing this with that weird tightness in my chest you get when you know you did the right thing. But you also know it's going to get messy before it gets clean. I run a small plumbing operation in a suburb outside Portland. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on and the fridge full, and it's given me this one superpower. I don't get intimidated by paperwork, official threats, or people who think being loud counts as being right. My son Nolan, 8, male, is the opposite of paperwork. Nolan is motion. Nolan is questions. Nolan is a tiny CEO in a backwards cap who somehow thinks every interaction is an opportunity and every dollar is a scoreboard. I don't know where he learned phrases like profit margin and customer retention, but I swear the internet is raising my kid in real time. Second Saturday of June, he walks into the kitchen and drops a full business plan on the table, written in crayon on a sheet of notebook paper like he's pitching Shark Tank. Lemonade stand. $2 a cup. No negotiating. Profits going to Beyblades because his current ones are mid. I should have said no based on his assumption that lemons appear for free out of the earth like rocks. Instead, I said yes because I'm his dad and because there's a specific kind of pride that hits when your kid wants to work for something. We spent Friday night building the stand, folding table, plywood sign, cooler full of ice. He insisted on squeezing the lemons himself. It took forever. His little hands were sticky. His face was serious like he was defusing a bomb. Saturday morning, he sets up at the end of the driveway like he's opening a flagship store. Customer log. Timestamps, tally marks, a Ziploc bag of ones and quarters. Startup capital from yours truly. By noon, he's sold 14 cups, and the neighborhood is doing that adorable suburban thing where everyone pretends they're not starved for community, and then suddenly they're all out walking dogs and happening to pass by. Nolan's beaming, saying thank you, making change correctly, looking people in the eye. I'm on the porch watching him and feeling that big dumb dad emotion that doesn't have a word. It's not pride exactly. It's relief? Like maybe I'm doing something right. Then Tanya shows up. Tanya, mid-40s, female, lives 4 houses down. Bleached hair that always looks like it's one heat tool away from snapping in half. Realtor energy. HOA vice president. White Lexus. The kind of woman who can turn hello into a power play. Her daughter Peyton, 9, female, is a quiet kid who hovers behind Tanya like she's waiting for permission to breathe. Peyton bought a cup, smiled, said it was good. Nolan lit up like a Christmas tree. Tanya didn't even acknowledge him. She watched Peyton drink, then turned and walked away like she'd just inspected a product she didn't approve of. I thought that was the end. 3 hours later, Tanya comes back with a totally different posture. Shoulders locked, chin up, that purposeful march like she's storming a castle. Peyton's trailing behind her, confused and already tense. Nolan is counting his money, $38, and he looks up with that wide-open kid face that still believes adults are basically fair. Tanya stops at the table and says, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Your lemonade made my daughter sick." Not concern. Not a question. A public accusation. I feel my stomach drop in that slow, heavy way. I step off the porch and walk over, trying to keep my voice calm because Nolan is watching my face like it's a weather forecast. "What do you mean sick?" I ask. "Stomach cramps since she drank that," Tanya snaps, pointing at the cooler like it's toxic waste. "What did you put in it?" Nolan's hands freeze mid-count. His mouth opens, then closes. He looks at me. "Dad?" "Lemons, sugar, water," I say. "Same recipe since the dawn of time." Tanya's eyes narrow like I'm insulting her intelligence. She reaches for one of Nolan's paper cups, sniffs it dramatically, then, without warning, dumps it onto the sidewalk in this slow, disgusted pour like she's making a point. "Something in there isn't right," she says. "You can't just sell food to children without oversight." And then she reaches for the pitcher. My brain does this instant math. She's going to dump it on the table, on the money, on the sign, on my kid. I grab the handle at the same time she does. She yanks. I hold. And in the middle of that tug of war over a plastic pitcher, over lemonade, she leans forward, invading Nolan's space like she's about to physically bulldoze him. So I do the only thing that makes sense in half a second. I pull back. The pitcher tilts. Gravity does the rest. And suddenly Tanya is standing there, soaked. Sticky lemonade running down her blouse, across her white capris, pooling in her sandals, while the entire street goes dead quiet like we all collectively forgot how to breathe. Peyton's mouth is open. Nolan looks like he just watched a volcano erupt. Tanya sputters, furious and dripping. You just poured that on me. I keep my voice level, but my heart is hammering. You grabbed my kid's property and tried to destroy it, I say. I pulled it back. It spilled. Unfortunate. Her face twitches like she can't decide whether to scream or cry. Then she says it, the line that makes my blood go cold. My husband is a police officer, she spits. You have no idea what you just started. And I swear to God, right as she says it, I remember the little black camera above my front door, the Ring doorbell, blinking quietly like an eye that never closes. I point up at it. It's been recording all day, I tell her. We can let the footage sort it out. For a split second, her expression slips. Not rage, fear. Like she just realized she walked into a room with mirrors on every wall. Then she grabs Peyton by the arm and storms off, lemonade dripping down her elbows the whole way home. Nolan stares at the empty pitcher like someone died. Then, in a voice small enough to break me, he whispers, Dad, that was like $4 worth of lemonade. And that's when something in me hardens. Because it wasn't about $4. It was about a grown woman using humiliation as a hobby. And my kid just became her target. I didn't yell after she left. That's the part I keep replaying. I didn't chase her down the street. I didn't call her names. I didn't escalate. I walked Nolan inside, washed the sticky lemonade off his hands, and refilled the pitcher like we were resetting a board game instead of a neighborhood war. But something had shifted. You can feel it when a line gets crossed. It's like the air pressure changes. That night, after Nolan went to bed, I downloaded the Ring footage. I watched it twice, her approach, the accusation, the deliberate cup dump, the grab, the lean into Nolan's space, the spill, her threat about her husband being a cop. On camera, it looked exactly like it felt in the moment, a grown adult trying to physically intimidate a child over a paper cup. I backed it up in 3 places: laptop, cloud, external drive. I've been running a plumbing business for 12 years. You learn early. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Sunday morning, Nolan asked if he could run the stand again next weekend. That hit me harder than anything else. He wasn't scared. He wasn't embarrassed. He just wanted to keep building his brand. Of course, I told him. I didn't mention that Tanya had already started moving, because she had. By Monday afternoon, the neighborhood Facebook group had a vague post. Concerned parent here. Has anyone else experienced stomach issues after purchasing homemade food from unlicensed vendors on Maple Drive? No names. But everyone knew. 23 comments in the first hour. Some people defending kids being kids. Some asking what happened. Tanya replying in that fake measured tone. I don't want to call anyone out publicly. I just think safety matters. Safety. Like Nolan was running a black market meat operation. By Tuesday, she'd told 3 different parents at school pickup that her daughter had been violently ill. Peyton, from what I could tell, was running around perfectly fine on her scooter. Wednesday, one of my regular plumbing clients called. Hey, Evan. Weird question. Is everything okay at home? That's when I found out Tanya had escalated. She'd recognized my company name on my truck, Googled it, called the number listed. She told them she was a concerned neighbor and that I had ongoing hygiene issues on my property. Suggested maybe they should reconsider hiring someone who let unsanitary food operations run in their driveway. My stomach went cold. Mess with me, fine. Mess with my work? That's my mortgage. That's groceries. That's Nolan's braces someday. I drove straight home and started a new legal pad. Date: Time. Who called? Exact words used. I screenshotted her Facebook post, archived the comments before she could edit them. That evening, Nolan was at the kitchen table drawing a new sign for next Saturday. "Dad," he said casually, "do you think we should add strawberry flavor to diversify inventory?" 8 years old. I looked at him, his hands still faintly stained from lemons, his confidence not even slightly shaken, and I felt this mix of pride and something darker. Because he didn't know that a grown woman was actively trying to tank his reputation. Saturday came. We set up again. Same table, same cooler. Same $2 price. Traffic was lighter. People who'd stopped the week before walked past without eye contact. One mom crossed the street entirely. Nolan noticed. Of course he did. He pretended not to. Kept marking tally marks in his notebook, like gaps between sales didn't exist. Down the block, I saw it. 4 houses down. At Tanya's driveway. A brand new lemonade stand. Pinterest level. Matching tablecloth. Chalkboard menu listing flavors in curly script. Mason jars with floating lemon slices like it was a boutique cafe. $1.50 per cup. Undercutting my 8-year-old by 50 cents. Peyton stood behind it looking uncomfortable. Tanya stood beside her like a campaign manager, waving people over with exaggerated cheer. Fresh organic lemonade, made safely. She made sure the words safely carried. I felt something hot and steady settle into my chest. This wasn't about safety, this was about control, and she wasn't done. Around noon, while Nolan was mid-sale, Tanya walked down the sidewalk again. Not dripping this time. Dry, composed, smiling too wide. She stopped at the edge of our driveway and said loudly enough for 3 customers to hear. "Just so everyone knows, I've contacted the HOA and the health department. Selling unlicensed food can carry fines." Nolan's hand froze mid-change again. Same look as last week. I stepped forward. "Feel free," I said evenly. "We'll cooperate fully." She blinked. I don't think she expected calm. I don't think she expected me to not snap. She thrives on reaction, on spectacle. So I didn't give it to her. But when she turned and walked away, she didn't just leave. She kicked the leg of Nolan's folding table as she passed. Not enough to flip it, just enough to make it wobble violently. The cooler slid an inch. 1 paper cup tipped over and rolled into the gutter. Nolan stared at the table like it had betrayed him. That tiny physical nudge. That was intentional. That wasn't Facebook drama. That was escalation. And in that moment, watching my son steady his stand with shaking hands, I understood something clearly. She wasn't going to stop at rumors. She wanted to break him. And I was done being passive. I just hadn't shown my hand yet. That night, Nolan went to bed quieter than usual. Not sad exactly, more like he was running calculations in his head that didn't have numbers yet. He sat on the edge of his bed, peeling dried lemon pulp off his fingers and asked, "Dad, is she allowed to do that?" "Do what?" "Make people scared of buying from me." That question wrecked me in this slow, delayed way. Because how do you explain to an 8-year-old that some adults treat life like a scoreboard and will happily stomp a kid's joy just to feel tall? "No," I said. "She's not allowed to do that. But she can try." He nodded like he understood, then whispered, "Okay, then we just have to be better." And that was the moment I stopped thinking of this as neighborhood drama and started thinking of it the way I think about a leak inside a wall. Ignore it, and it spreads until it ruins the whole house. I opened my legal pad file again. Saturday, 12:07 p.m. Tanya approached stand. Stated she contacted HOA/health department. Kicked table leg while walking away. Cup tipped. Cooler shifted. I pulled the ring footage from that angle. You could see her foot make contact. It was subtle, but it was there. The kind of thing that looks accidental if you want it to, and looks like exactly what it is if you don't. Sunday morning, my business got a 1-star Google review. No accountability, flooded our kitchen, and refused to pay for damages. The address in the review wasn't even in my service area. The job described wasn't anything my company had ever done. I screenshotted it, reported it, and added it to the file. Monday, I got a call from my client, the bathroom remodel I'd been scheduled to start the following week. Evan, someone called us, said you were being investigated. Something about permits. My throat went tight. Did they give a name? I asked. The client hesitated. They said they were a neighbor. They sounded really confident. Confident. That was Tanya's whole personality. I drove across town, sat at their kitchen table, and calmly laid out my contractor license, bonding, insurance, inspection record. I kept my voice even, but inside I was boiling so hard I could taste it. By the time I left, the job was back on. But I'd lost half a day and a chunk of dignity because a woman with too much time and not enough self-control decided my kid's lemonade stand was an enemy. That night, I went outside to take the trash out and saw it. Nolan's sign, the plywood one he'd painted with those wobbly block letters, wasn't leaning against the garage anymore. At first I thought I'd moved it. Then I saw the little flecks of dried paint on the driveway where it had scraped. Someone had dragged it. I walked the block with a flashlight like an idiot, heart banging, scanning bushes and ditches like I was searching for a missing person. I found it 3 houses down, shoved behind a hedge near the sidewalk like someone had hidden it on purpose. The corner was cracked. One of the nails had ripped through the plywood. I stood there holding my kid's sign in the dark, and I felt this sick mix of rage and sadness. Because who does that? Who sneaks out at night and steals a child's lemonade sign? I didn't have proof it was Tanya. Not yet. But my gut knew. That same gut that tells you when a pipe's going to burst before it does. I brought it home, fixed the crack with wood glue, and set it on the kitchen table like a piece of evidence. Nolan came down in the morning, saw it, and his face fell. They took it, he said, voice small. They tried, I corrected. They didn't keep it. He ran his fingers over the crack like it hurt him. Then he looked up at me and asked, "Are we in trouble with the health department?" And that did something to me. Something cold and focused. No, I said. We're going to be so annoyingly, aggressively not in trouble that she's going to choke on it. That day, on my lunch break, I went to the city clerk's office. I asked, very politely, what it would take to get any kind of permit or written guidance for a kid selling lemonade. The woman behind the counter blinked at me like I'd asked for a license to breathe. Then she laughed. But she also printed the guidelines. And as I walked out with that stack of paper in my hand, I realized Tanya had made one massive mistake. She'd tried to weaponize official rules against someone who actually knows how to play that game. And now I was going to beat her with the most boring, devastating revenge on earth. Paperwork, proof, and letting her melt down in public while I stood there smiling. By Wednesday, I had a laminated sheet zip-tied to the front of Nolan's stand. I'm not exaggerating when I say it looked like something you'd see at a farmer's market run by a retired engineer with too much time on his hands. At the top in bold, Nolan's legendary lemonade, community-compliant vendor. Below that, ingredients. Fresh lemons, sugar, filtered water, ice. No artificial additives. Hand sanitizer available. Not blocking sidewalk access. Compliant with City of Portland Youth Sales Guidelines, see attached. And then, right next to it, inside a clear plastic sleeve, a printed copy of the city clerk's email stating that children selling lemonade occasionally from their driveway did not require a permit, provided they weren't obstructing traffic or selling hazardous foods. I didn't add commentary. I didn't add sarcasm. Just facts. Nolan thought it was the coolest thing he'd ever seen. "Dad," he whispered, touching the laminated page like it was a diploma. "This makes us official." We set up that Saturday like usual. 4 houses down, Tanya's stand was back. Bigger this time. Balloon arch. Hand-lettered sign about locally sourced organic ingredients. She'd upgraded to a folding canopy. The whole thing screamed, "Look at me." Peyton stood behind it again, looking tired. Tanya stood in front of it like a politician working a crowd. Traffic was split. A few people stopped at Nolan's out of loyalty. A few drifted to hers, curious. Around 11:15, a white county SUV rolled slowly down the street. Tanya saw it first. She straightened instantly. I felt Nolan's shoulders tense. The SUV parked. A middle-aged county health inspector stepped out holding a clipboard. Neutral expression. Bored, honestly. He walked straight to Nolan's stand. "Morning," he said. "We received a complaint about food safety." Nolan looked up at me. I gave him a small nod. The inspector glanced at the laminated sheet. He actually smiled. "You've got documentation?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Nolan said, standing up straighter than I've ever seen him stand. The inspector read the city email, looked at the hand sanitizer bottle, looked at the clean cooler. "Everything here looks fine," he said casually. "Kids do this all the time." Then, this part is my favorite. He walked down to Tanya's stand. I didn't move. I didn't gloat. I just watched. He asked her the same questions. She launched into this polished speech about community health standards and concerned parenting. He asked if she had documentation from the city like Nolan did. Her smile faltered. "Well, no, but that's because we don't need—" He interrupted gently. "Ma'am, neither does he." Silence. The inspector bought a cup from Nolan on his way back to the SUV, full price. Took a sip. "Pretty good," he said. And then he left. The street felt different after that, like something had shifted under the surface. Tanya didn't yell. She didn't storm over. She stood very still behind her balloon arch, jaw tight, eyes locked on our laminated sheet like it had personally insulted her. Around noon, Nolan hit 25 sales. His best since this whole thing started. That's when Tanya lost it. She walked over, fast, no performance smile this time. "You think this is funny?" she hissed at me. I kept my voice low. "We're following guidelines. You're mocking me with that stupid sign." "It's factual," her face flushed red. "You humiliated me," she said, louder now, "in front of an inspector. You called him." Her composure cracked. She reached out suddenly and yanked at the laminated sheet. The zip ties snapped. The plastic sleeve tore. The city email fluttered to the ground like a receipt in a storm. Nolan gasped. That sound, that sharp intake of breath, did something to me that no threat ever could. "Stop," I said, stepping between them. But she wasn't done. She grabbed the edge of Nolan's cooler and shoved. Hard. It didn't flip, but it slid across the driveway, spilling ice and knocking over the stack of cups. A few rolled into the street. People froze. Someone across the road said, "Hey!" Tanya's voice went high and wild. "You don't get to make me look stupid in my own neighborhood." Nolan was scrambling to pick up cups like this was his fault. And that was it for me. I pulled out my phone and calmly started recording. "Continue," I said evenly. She saw the camera, and something flickered in her eyes, but instead of stopping, she doubled down. She knocked the tip jar off the table. Coins scattered across the concrete. Nolan dropped to his knees to gather them, and I realized in that moment that this was no longer petty competition. This was a grown adult unraveling in broad daylight because an 8-year-old had paperwork. The hook, the moment everything tipped? It wasn't the health inspector. It wasn't the Facebook smear. It was watching my kid kneel on hot concrete, collecting quarters while she stood over him shaking. Because that's when I stopped playing defense and started planning something that would end this permanently. When Tanya knocked over the tip jar, something inside me went completely still. Not rage, not yelling. Still. Nolan was on his knees on the driveway, scooping quarters into his hands like they were something fragile. His ears were red. He wasn't crying. He was doing math. "That's like $11, he muttered. "Maybe 12. Behind him, Tanya was breathing hard like she'd just run a mile. "You are provoking me," she snapped at me. "You think that stupid sign makes you superior?" I kept recording. "You just shoved a cooler belonging to an 8-year-old, I said calmly, "and knocked over his money." She stepped closer. Too close. "Stop filming me. You're on my property." That word, property, landed wrong. She shoved me. Not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to make it clear this wasn't an accident. Gasps from the sidewalk. Someone across the street said, "That's enough, Tanya." And she spun toward them like they'd betrayed her personally. "You're all siding with him," she shouted. "He's harassing me." I lowered my phone just enough to keep her in frame. "No one is harassing you," I said. "You called the health department. You vandalized his sign. You shoved his stand. You shoved me." Her face changed when I said vandalized. Because she knew. "You can't prove that," she said, too fast. I didn't answer. That was the first crack. She stormed back to her driveway, knocking one of her own balloon supports over in the process. The arch sagged. Peyton stood frozen behind her table, eyes wide, hands gripping the edge. I walked Nolan inside. He carried the cooler himself. Didn't ask for help. Once the door closed, he finally looked at me and asked, "Are we closing forever?" That question hit harder than the shove. "No," I said quietly. "We're upgrading." That night, I pulled every clip. The lemonade spill from 2 weeks ago, the table kick, the sign dragged down the block. Today's cooler shove. The tip jar. I edited nothing, just time-stamped everything. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do yet. I drove to the county sheriff's office, not to yell, not to threaten, to file a report, property interference, harassment, physical contact, and I made sure to include one specific detail in writing. She previously stated her husband is a police officer and implied consequences. The deputy taking the report raised an eyebrow. "What's the husband's name?" "Derek." Recognition flickered. That was crack number 2. By Tuesday, things escalated again, but not from me. 2 of my plumbing clients forwarded me voicemails. Tanya had called them directly. Again. This time, not just vague accusations. She told one of them I was under investigation. Told another she had video evidence of me assaulting her. That was the moment she crossed from neighborhood drama into business sabotage. I didn't yell. I called my attorney friend Mark. He's done contract work for me before. I sent him the clips. "All of them?" he asked. "All of them." He was quiet for a long second. "Evan, she's escalating because she thinks you won't." That night, I drafted a formal complaint addressed to Internal Affairs. Not about Derek personally threatening me. He hadn't. About his badge being used as leverage. I attached transcripts of Tanya's voicemail from 2 weeks earlier. "My husband will make your life difficult." I attached screenshots of her posts. I attached the shove footage. I wrote it like I was submitting a project report. Facts only. No adjectives. Then I mailed it certified. Sweet revenge isn't screaming. Sweet revenge is documentation with a paper trail. Thursday evening, Derek showed up at my door. Civilian clothes, tired eyes. "I didn't tell her to say any of that," he said immediately. "I know," I replied, "and I didn't call your clients." "I know." He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. "She said you were threatening her." "I have everything on video." He swallowed. "They pulled me in today." Asked about the complaint. There it was. Crack number 3. "I'm not trying to ruin you," I said. "I'm trying to stop her." He closed his eyes briefly. "She won't stop. Then she'll face consequences." He nodded slowly, like someone realizing a long-ignored storm had finally reached shore. When he left, I felt something settle. Not victory, momentum. Saturday came again. Nolan set up with fresh confidence, and for the first time since this started, Tanya didn't. Her driveway was empty. But that didn't mean it was over. It just meant the explosion was moving indoors. And I knew, because unstable people don't fade quietly, that whatever came next was going to be louder. I just didn't know how loud yet. The silence from Tanya lasted exactly 4 days. 4 days of no lemonade stand down the street. 4 days of no Facebook essays about food safety. 4 days of Nolan selling peacefully again, like the storm had rolled out. I didn't trust it. People like Tanya don't retreat. They regroup. Thursday afternoon, I found out how she was regrouping. I was finishing a water heater install when my phone started vibrating nonstop. Not calls, emails. 3, back-to-back, all from different addresses. Subject line: formal notice of intent to sue. The body was almost identical in each. You have repeatedly harassed and intimidated a mother and child in your neighborhood. Video evidence shows you assaulting me with a pitcher of liquid. If this behavior does not cease immediately, I will pursue legal action. Attached: a blurry still frame from the lemonade spill incident. Just the moment where lemonade is midair. No context, no grab, no lean into Nolan's space, just splash. I leaned against the work van and laughed once. Not amused. More like impressed at the audacity. By the time I got home, there was a certified envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a small claims filing. $2,000. Emotional distress. Property damage. Her ruined outfit. Harassment. My first instinct was anger. My second was clarity. This was desperation. She'd lost the health department angle. She'd triggered internal affairs. Derek had been pulled in for questioning. He'd texted me that much, just, they're reviewing everything. Now she wanted a courtroom stage. That night, Nolan was at the kitchen table sketching a fall menu idea. Apple cider, which I told him we'd table until next season. "Dad," he asked casually, "why is her driveway empty?" "Because she's busy," I said. "Planning something?" "Kids know." I didn't lie. "Yeah." He chewed on his pencil for a second. "Are we still allowed to sell?" "Absolutely." He nodded once like that settled it. The next escalation came Saturday, not from her driveway, from ours. We were mid-rush, about 20 customers deep, when Tanya walked straight up the sidewalk alone. No Peyton this time, no props. She didn't look manic, she looked hollow, like she hadn't slept. "You're enjoying this," she said quietly. "I'm enjoying my son selling lemonade. You ruined my marriage." That stopped me cold. "I didn't touch your marriage," I said. "You filed a complaint. You threatened me with a badge." Her jaw tightened. "Derek is under review because of you." "No," I said evenly. "Because of what you said." She stepped closer, too close again. "You think you're so calm," she whispered, "like you're above this." I kept my hands visible, open. Then she did something that made every nerve in my body fire. She reached past me, grabbed Nolan's customer log notebook, and tore a page out. Ripped it clean in half. Paper fluttered down between us like confetti at the worst party in the world. Nolan froze. It wasn't just paper. It was his sales record, his proof, his little system. "Stop," I said, louder now. She didn't. She grabbed the edge of the plywood sign and snapped it off the table. It cracked clean across the old glue seam from when it had been dragged. That was intentional. She knew it was repaired. Nolan's breath hitched. Not tears. Shock. I stepped fully between them. "Back up," I said. For a second I thought she would shove me again. Instead, she started screaming, high, uncontrolled, almost animal. "He's manipulating all of you. You think this is innocent? He's humiliating me." Neighbors came out. Phones came up. And for the first time since this started, she wasn't controlling the narrative. She was unraveling. "Leave," I said calmly. "Right now." She swung her arm like she might strike me. She didn't make contact, but she knocked the cooler lid off in the motion, and it clattered across the driveway. Someone behind us said, "I'm calling this in." That's when it shifted. Not because of the cops. Because she realized she was no longer directing the scene. She turned and stormed back down the sidewalk, knocking over one of her own trash bins in the process. It rolled into the street. The police arrived 15 minutes later. Different officers. They took statements. They watched my footage on my phone. They looked at the cracked sign in Nolan's hands. And they issued her a formal warning for disorderly conduct and property interference. No arrest. But it was official. Paper trail. And that's when the real fallout began. Because when unstable people realize they're losing control, they don't shrink. They explode. and Tanya was running out of places to aim that explosion. The formal warning should have ended it. It didn't. If anything, it stripped away the last thin layer of polish Tanya had been clinging to. Monday morning, I walked outside to head to a job and found both my truck's passenger side tires slashed. Not flattened. Slashed. Clean, diagonal cuts. Deliberate. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the rubber peeled back like torn skin. I felt that same stillness again. The one from when she knocked over the tip jar. The calm that comes right before something decisive. Nolan came out a minute later, backpack on, ready for school. "Dad?" He saw it. His face changed. "That's because of me," he said immediately, and that hurt more than the tires. "No," I said firmly. "This is because someone can't handle consequences." I called it in. Officer came, took photos, asked if I had cameras. I did. Ring covered the driveway but not the street angle. We pulled the footage. 1:43 a.m. Tanya's white Lexus rolls slowly past. Stops. Hazards blink once. A shadow moves near my truck. The video quality isn't perfect, but it's enough. Enough to show her shape. Enough to show intent. I sent the clip straight to the responding officer. Then to my attorney friend Mark. "Now we escalate," Mark said simply. By Wednesday, Tanya had been served with a citation for vandalism pending review. It wasn't a dramatic arrest scene. It was paperwork. And paperwork, apparently, was her trigger. Thursday afternoon, Nolan and I were at the driveway stand again. Smaller crowd this time because word had spread about the incident. Halfway through the afternoon, Tanya came out of her house screaming. Not walking, running, hair wild, phone in hand. "You called the police on me?" she shouted from the middle of the street. I didn't answer. "You're destroying my life." She stormed straight across her lawn, straight toward our driveway. Nolan stepped back instinctively. I stepped forward. She didn't slow down. She grabbed the entire folding table with both hands and flipped it. Not nudged, not shoved, flipped. The cooler tumbled. Ice and lemonade exploded across the concrete. Cups scattered into the yard. The cash box flew and cracked open. Nolan yelped, not from pain but from shock. It was chaos. Lemonade dripping into the cracks of the driveway, quarters bouncing into the gutter, his laminated compliance sheet floating in sticky water, and Tanya stood there shaking. "You think you win because you have paperwork?" she screamed. "You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone?" Someone across the street yelled, "Tanya, stop!" She kicked the broken sign, what was left of it, sending it sliding toward the curb. And then she made the worst decision yet. She picked up a lemon from the spilled bag and hurled it. Not at me, at Nolan. It hit his shoulder and bounced off, rolling to the ground. That was it. That was the line. I pulled my phone up, not to record, to dial. "Stay behind me," I told Nolan quietly. Police response was faster this time. Multiple neighbors had already called. Tanya didn't run. She stood in the middle of the street ranting about conspiracies, about harassment, about how everyone was against her. When the officers arrived, she turned on them. "You're taking his side." One officer calmly asked her to step back. She refused. They didn't tackle her, didn't dramatize it. They issued her a disorderly conduct citation and escorted her back to her property. But here's the thing about public meltdowns. They don't stay local. By that evening, 3 different neighbors had sent me clips from their security cameras. Different angles. Clear shots of her flipping the table, throwing the lemon. And then something happened I didn't expect. Derek showed up again. This time, he didn't knock. He stood at the edge of the driveway looking at the sticky mess we were still cleaning up. "I filed for separation," he said quietly. I didn't respond immediately. "She's not stable," he continued. "Internal Affairs is reviewing everything." I didn't know about the tires. I believed him. Peyton wasn't with him. "She's staying with my sister tonight," he added, like he knew I'd wonder. Nolan was inside, washing lemonade off his hands for the 3rd time that week. Derek looked at me like a man who'd watched his house burn, and only just realized he'd been the one pouring gasoline. "I'm sorry," he said. "It wasn't enough to undo anything, but it was something." That night, I filed for a restraining order. Not because I wanted revenge, because my son flinched when a lemon hit his shoulder, and I would burn the world down before I let that become normal. Court was set for the following week. And Tanya? She wasn't done yet. But this time, the walls weren't just closing in from me. They were closing in from everywhere. Court was quiet. That's the part that surprised me most. After weeks of screaming, table flipping, tire slashing, Facebook essays, and lemons flying through the air, the courtroom felt almost sterile, like none of it had actually happened. Nolan wasn't there. I'd made sure of that. He was at school, probably explaining to someone why adding apple cider to a lemonade menu might cannibalize brand identity. I sat at the petitioner's table with a folder 3 inches thick. Printed stills from the ring footage, the health inspector visit, the cooler shove, the torn customer log page, the slashed tires at 1:43 a.m., the flipped table, the lemon thrown at my kid. Tanya walked in 10 minutes late, hair pulled back tight. No makeup, no realtor armor, just brittle. Derek wasn't with her. The judge asked her first if she contested the temporary restraining order. "Yes," she said immediately. "He's been harassing me for months." My stomach didn't even twitch. I'd expected that. Then it was my turn. I didn't editorialize. I didn't dramatize. I handed over timestamps, video clips, police reports, the citation for vandalism, the disorderly conduct warning, the internal affairs acknowledgement letter referencing the complaint about misuse of a badge. I let the facts speak. The judge watched the lemon hit Nolan's shoulder. Twice. Watched her flip the folding table. Listened to her voicemail from weeks ago. "My husband will make your life difficult." Silence in the room. The judge looked at Tanya for a long moment. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "this is a pattern of escalating behavior." Tanya opened her mouth, closed it. Opened it again. "He provoked me," she finally said. The judge didn't even blink. "With lemonade?" It wasn't mocking. It was worse. It was disbelief. The restraining order was granted. 6 months, minimum. No contact. No approaching within 300 feet of my home or my son. When we stepped outside the courthouse, Tanya didn't look at me. She walked straight to her car, jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. That should have been the end. It wasn't dramatic after that. No final screaming match, no cinematic showdown, just consequences. Within 2 weeks, her brokerage terminated her. Between the public meltdown at the stand, the disorderly conduct citation, and the court record, she was a liability. Derek finalized the separation. Peyton moved with him to an apartment across town. Tanya stayed in the house alone for exactly a month. Then a "for sale" sign went up. Not her sign. Another agent's. The lawn started growing past HOA guidelines. The balloon arch box sat in the garage, visible through a cracked door like a relic from a failed campaign. One morning, the white Lexus was gone. And that was it. No announcement. No apology. Just disappearance. A few neighbors told me she'd moved in with a sister out of state. I didn't verify. I didn't care. What I cared about was the following Saturday. Nolan set up the stand again. New sign, fresh plywood, cleaner lettering. We added strawberry mint like he'd wanted weeks ago. He sold out by 1 p.m. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Dad, next summer I think we expand. Maybe cookies, but we'll need to check regulations." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. "Always check regulations," I told him. Later that afternoon, Derek and Peyton walked down the sidewalk. Not awkward, not hostile. Peyton bought a cup. Nolan handed it to her without hesitation. No tension, just kids. Derek caught my eye. He didn't say thank you. He didn't apologize again. He just nodded. Sometimes that's enough. That night, Nolan counted his earnings. $312 total for the summer. He split it into 2 envelopes. One labeled Beyblades, the other labeled Reinvestment. 8 years old. A grown woman tried to crush him over $2. She weaponized a badge, vandalized property, flipped tables, slashed tires, threw fruit at a child. And in the end, all I did was document. All I did was stay calm. All I did was let her make her own life implode in 1080p. Sweet revenge isn't loud. It's watching someone who thrives on chaos realize the cameras were rolling the whole time. And next summer, we're adding cookies.